Hello everybody, Simon Jacobson here. Another episode of Meaningful Live. I hope everybody's well. We'll be speaking about fighting ageism. Respect your elders. This program is dedicated by Suzette Allen in memory of Lowy family of Passewalk or Pacewalk, Germany. All now of blessed memory. May each neshama merit an aliyah as our family dedicates the study of this week's chapter, Parshat Eikev, to their memory. Okay, well, ageism. What does discrimination against the elderly tell us about ourselves? I think it's an important question to ask. So let's spell out first the problem, the dilemma. I recall reading that statistically, the largest demographic, in the Western world at least, and maybe everywhere, meaning the largest segment of our population are the elderly, people over 60 or 65. That's due to medical breakthroughs, longevity, life expectancy, and just in general, the baby boom after World War II, which now, I believe everybody born in that baby boom is now in that age group. So the issues are more acute and more amplified than ever before. And what does it come down to? It's been coined ageism, a type of form of racism, the ism of age, where age is seen as something detrimental, whether it's forcing retirement, whether it's just in general neglecting people who are older. Now the explanation on a ostensible level for this is that the elderly are just not as productive, not as youthful, not as energetic. They don't generate the same amount of money as younger, more vibrant people. It's not exactly accurate, but that's part of it. To take it a step further, let's be perfectly blunt, it's about the worship of youth. I remember I think a 40-year-old woman coming to my class, very beautiful, striking. And afterwards, she tells me privately, I know people look at me, I'm beautiful. I used to be a model, a supermodel. But she says, once you hit a certain age, your looks are just not the same, the skin tone, whatever it may be, and it has devastated me in so many ways. Yes, I made money based on my looks, and now I'm discovering that it's not, my real value is not about my looks or externals as much as I worshipped it. So I said, so what would you say to a 20-year-old? I said to me, well, I've learned a lot of things. Money isn't everything. So we live in an age where perhaps more than ever, the worship of the external, meaning surface level beauty, surface level productivity, is undermining the very value of what defines us as human beings. I know it's easy to talk about philosophically, but when it comes down to it, especially in a commercial world that rewards money, it seems that it's the youth where the money is. The truth is, many companies come to recognize that's not necessarily the case, because accumulated wealth of the elderly is actually much more than it is of the young, and they spend more. But that's another point. That would be an ulterior motive why people would perhaps focus. You look at television, especially late night TV or other, you see how much is focused on elderly products, whether it's medications or equipment or other things to help the elderly. But that's purely commercial based. it does come down to what we value as a human being. In my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, I have a chapter on aging. And there I quote a line, "The soul never ages. It only gets younger. It's the body that ages." So I would submit that the more we worship the body, the more we worship material things, obviously the more we will discriminate and the more we will dismiss people who don't fit that physical model of perfection. The more we value the soul, the more we'll value people not by age or not by any other externals, but by their quality. So what it really reflects upon is the commercialization, the industrialization, if you wish, even the objectification of external beauty, external value, which really is not just about others, it's about ourselves. Just because you're 20 years old, or 25 years old, or 30 years old, whatever the age, that doesn't mean that if you dismiss or you in some way don't respect your elders, that you are respecting yourself. You're also not really respecting yourself. You're only respecting yourself for your outer value, your buying power, if you wish, your energy level. But what about all that power that comes with wisdom, with experience, with seasoning, the maturity? How much value, and I'm talking now even on a commercial level, lies in people who've spent their lifetimes in the rat race, learning through trial and error, through competition. And that's all being discarded because they may not have that youthful vigor that they once had. So really, this is an opportunity to challenge ourselves and look at what really is valuable in life. So I know people in their teens even, and young adults, who are claiming they're going through a midlife crisis. Yeah. And there are people who are in their 80s and even 90s who still have that sparkle in the eye. Something extremely alive. What is it that distinguishes? And what is it that defines us as individuals like that? So what does it mean to live a soulful life? It means to live a purposeful life, a life of mission. When you're on a mission, it really makes no difference what age you are, because the mission has to be fulfilled. It may be different of how many miles you can run an hour, or how fast you can go, or how physically you can exert yourself. But as far as the mission goes, I could see someone who with experience far surpassing someone with less experience, even though the person who has less experience is physically better shape. But we live in a world where we are trapped. Let's be honest, we're trapped. We're trapped by the distractions and by the seduction of the external, of the surface, which is quite ironic and paradoxical, being that so much of our lives today are driven by invisible forces in technology and science. And yet we still hold on to that outer look. Now, I'm not suggesting we should be reckless or we should be dismissive and flippant about externals, but an external is only as powerful as what it reflects within. So the obvious that everyone can state is the statement in the Bible, respect your elders. Stand up for someone that's older than you. Everyone can relate to that. There's the respect of age, respect of seniority, respect of someone who's been through more in life, and the very fact that we need to be more sensitive to someone who may need a seat on a bus or on a train. That's on a very, very basic level, but it's far deeper than that. The word in Hebrew for someone of age is actually sage. Yeah, I understand not everyone of age is a sage, but sagacity, The idea of being a sage is really what it means, someone that has earned wisdom. Now, truth be told, I have to also state something, a very sharp line from the Talmud that says that people are scholars. As they age, they become like vintage wine. They become more intelligent, more sagacity. And people without wisdom, as they age, become more of a stumbling block. That's correct. It's like anything, junk in, junk out. The very aging process does not necessarily mean someone will become more refined or wiser. And regardless of that, there's still the need for respect no matter who that person may be. But it's interesting to understand that life, when we know this, that we're not just bodies. That's a corpse, God forbid. We're souls within bodies. And the soul is something that does not age, is not subject to the erosion, deterioration, and mortality of physical existence. As I said, on the contrary, it grows in intelligence, in experience, in seasoning, and actually, yes, in its spiritual awareness, its higher consciousness. So we live in a real paradox here. On one hand, we have tremendous breakthroughs in technology, in science, in medicine, in so many other areas. On the other hand, have we really developed in becoming more spiritual human beings? Not necessarily. And that's reflected in how we look at the aged, at the elderly. Frankly, it's reflected also how we look at anyone that doesn't fit our model. At people with special needs, with disabilities. Even at children. Even though children are younger and even more vibrant, but they're not yet developed, we don't yet see their value, their commercial value. So I would say the time has come, with all that's going on, all those breathtaking innovations in our lives, it's time to look at ourselves closely, of what defines us as human beings. Now, we all understand we have elderly parents. They can be, some would call, a burden, a difficulty. Even though it makes total sense, you were once that difficulty when you were a newborn, a young child, and that parent sacrificed their lives. But as one of the great sages once said, one father can support 10 children can't support one father. You could say the same thing with a mother. There's something about it. Is it that children love their parents less than the parents love their children? I wouldn't say that. It's just that I think younger people are more distracted. I have to do this. I mean, everybody knows Harry Chapin's classic. Man on the Moon and the Silver Spoon, where a child is growing up and admiring, worshiping his father, waiting for his father to come home. His father keeps telling him, yeah, I'll be there soon. He never shows up. And then as the father gets older and he wants to see his son, who always wanted to be like him, and he ends up being exactly like him, he's also not available. Captures poignantly this point. Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, that's the name. I want to be like you, Dad, and when I grow up. So it's a sad commentary. But then you look into the Bible and you see the value what the Bible says to the child. Ask your elder and let him tell you. Ask your grandfather and let him relate to you. Ask your grandmother and let her tell you the story. The value of the continuity from generation to generation. In business, people somewhat appreciate it. People who build businesses, they pass on the trade secrets to their children. But there's far more to life than business. Just like when someone asks you, who are you? You're not your business card. Your self-worth should not be defined by your net worth. And your value should not be defined by your age. It should be defined by your spiritual productivity. And that is not purely physical. Yes, there are people in 1 hour can achieve more at age 80 than a person at 20 in 1,000 hours. But for that, we need to value that quality of life. So whenever you look at society, I mentioned, I believe, in times, and the previous talks I've given, my conversation with that sociologist, and I asked him, what's the measure of a healthy society? And he said to me, the usual suspects. How many people have health insurance, the quality of the water that we drink, longevity, age expectancy, standard of living, the GDP. I mean, there's a whole list. And based on that, he said to me, we live in perhaps the best, most successful society in history. And how about you? What would you say? He asked me in return. And I was waiting for that. And I said, I would say one thing, the welfare of our families, of our children. I remember looking at me and he said to me, if that's the case, we may be one of the worst generations. So it really comes down to what we consider to be valuable. Let's take all the eternal truths in life. Love, truth, soul, purpose. All those things that are not physical commodities, that you can't go buy in a store or on Amazon, are those subject to age? Absolutely not. Everything that you can buy is a commodity. Anything that is subject to acquisition, to acquiring, that's subject to change. That's the mortal world. Everything changes, everything ages. So there are qualities we need to understand that not just are not subject to age, they're completely beyond that. They defy the mortal effect of erosion, deterioration, withering, and perishing. These are the true values that define the human being. So the fact that we're struggling with this issue of ageism and how we look at the elderly, and that many, whether they say it or not, they would look down as them being a burden, as them taking too much investment for somebody who may not live much longer. All is reflective, as it always is. When you want to understand a healthy situation, you don't look at the best part, you look at the edges. You look at those people who are not in the spotlight, center stage, the people who are either out of the workforce or before the workforce. That's where you understand what the quality of a generation of a society is like. No, I'm not here to go fight City Hall and create a revolution from the top down. So much is invested in the media, in Hollywood, commercially, in youth, and everything that comes with that. But we can all look at ourselves from the bottom up, grassroots, which is who I'm speaking to myself, to yourself, from the heart to heart, soul to soul. Tremendous value in the wisdom of somebody that's been around, who is no longer in that ego merry-go-round or roller coaster, who can step back and see life somewhat in context and perspective. Because when you're in that rat race, when you're on the merry-go-round and the roller coaster, it's very hard to look. And you'll see the wisdom of age, the wisdom that comes with that experience. That wisdom is invaluable. I used to always think naively and idealistically, can you combine the experience and the seasoning of an elder person and the youth and idealism and, I guess, adventure and free abandon of a young person? And I once tried an experiment. I remember my youngest brother, we were over 15 years apart. So I was in my 20s, and he was a little kid. And I remember sitting down with him and saying to him, can we bring together these two worlds? Not that I was some sage, but I was definitely older than him. And he looked at me, I guess he thought I was probably off my mind. It's interesting, you can't bring those two worlds together. What does the cynics say? I'm too young to know and I'm too old to find out. Is it possible to bring those two worlds together? I still hold out hope that it is. Maybe not completely, but in some extent, to some extent. And maybe with technology today, we can share the message. Who knows who's going to listen to it? I have been surprised. I've heard from people who've heard something I've said. Say, you know, my 7-year-old boy heard what you said, and it struck him. So I like to believe that we're closer than we think we are. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We have our minds. But there is something that you cannot really teach, and that is experience. It's as simple as that. It's like when the man with experience meets the man with the money. What happens? The man with the experience ends up with the money, and the man with the money ends up with the experience. But what I do want to emphasize is something about looking at ourselves, no matter what age you are, whether you're young or old, or in between, and actually even saying that doesn't sound right. It's about really recognizing the most true value in life. If you do have a grandfather or grandmother, and people talk about them, you ever hear how people talk about those grandparents that had deep impact on them? It's irreplaceable. Nothing can replace that. There's just something about it. The life experience, gone through many things, maybe suffering and not just surviving, but growing through it. These things cannot be captured in a book. They can be captured in a film. It's only real life experience that teaches you this. Yes, there have been books and films written about it, undeniably. So when we talk about this issue of ageism, time has come for us to look at ourselves in the mirror and realize that old man is you, and you are that old man. And it's not a matter just of time, it's a matter of understanding what is valuable within us. There's a very famous statement, famous among the mystics, that says, a child, as soon as a child is born, he or she begins to age. You just don't see the age. But you think someone at 90 years old begins to age at 70 or 80? No, they begin aging in the beginning, but you don't see it. The wrinkles will happen later. So we're all in a process of transition, just a matter of time. I find it actually quite sad and tragic when I see athletes or others who are in their prime, top of the world. So maybe they get paid well, so they have the money. But then what happens to their self-confidence? What happens to the thing that they were so valued for is no longer being valued? I just would like to believe that they found a second career, they found a second life where they can find their deeper sense of purpose. Do we have to wait till we lose something or everything before we discover that part of ourselves? So when I look at the aged, I think we should thank them because they remind us, and they should remind us, of what we consider valuable. Now I understand the challenges and difficulties. I have an elder mother. Thank God, she's healthy, vibrant, carries herself. But I can understand the challenges. And some people I know have challenges that their parent needs help, one way or another. So besides the moral obligation, I think it's deeper than that. Find a way to have a conversation with that person, if you're able to, and learn from them. There's tremendous things to learn from. What would they do in a situation that you're in? And even the business and corporate world can learn much. Now I understand there's the idea of mandated retirement. People don't want professors having tenure. Don't want guaranteed income. So they'll buy someone out, etc. That's the financial part. But there's a whole other dimension. And above all, on a spiritual level. Now, of course, someone will argue, one second, I know a lot of elderly people were never spiritual, so what am I going to gain from them now? They're still not spiritual. It's true. But life experience they have. And at the end of the day, we're all in this together. So to me, this is really a heartfelt call or cry about the very fact that we have to value the soul in each one of us. And that soul does not age. It only gets more vibrant. And that soul begins, yes, from birth. And even those in our community that don't seem as productive as others have tremendous things to teach us, tremendous things to give us, if we only allow it. And also forces you to ultimately think out of the box, not in the regular, called cookie cutter model, how do we fit people in, what we decide is productive, what we decide is successful. And I'll conclude with a statement from the book of Isaiah. The prophecy, he talks about the future and he says, there'll be a day where one person will not teach another because all will know me, will know the divine essence, will have that higher state of consciousness from young to old. So all will know that essential state, but they'll still be young and old. There'll still be those that have different levels. Because there's something that connects us all that transcends time and age, and there are things that distinguish us. What we want to do is bridge the two, to be able to bring that soul, which transcends age, into each age group, to each individual according to their person, to their needs and their circumstances in life. May everyone be healthy and live well and live long and appreciate longevity and appreciate age, not just as something that's in years, but in quality. And let's create a more soulful, a more heartfelt, and a more compassionate world. Thank you so much. This has been Simon Jacobson, Meaningful Life Center. MeaningfulLife.com is our website. Please subscribe to our growing YouTube channel. Share. Love to hear your feedback, thoughts, comments, suggestions. And no matter who you are or where you are, value that soul. Value that soul that sometimes is even more apparent and glowing more in the vintage wine of the aged, of the elderly. Be well and be blessed. Thank you.